I do want to get into this story. Kevin Garnett has spoken out, and everybody knows Kevin Garnett right now does a podcast. He's been doing it for years. If you listen to his podcast, he's very, very funny, very interactive with the fans. But a story came out actually yesterday that the owner, and I'm trying to get the name right here, the owner of the Timberwolves, if I'm not mistaken, get the owner of the Timberwolves over here. I want to get this whole story. I'm going to read this story to everybody. It's a quick story. It's a good story.
Glenn Taylor?
Glenn Taylor, yes. Kevin Garnett does not seem interested in a jersey retirement with the Timberwolves. Now, obviously, he will be inducted into the Celtics Hall of Fame. His jersey will be lifted up to the rafters next year with the Celtics. Kevin Garnett is a legend of basketball, and his contributions to the game will forever be immortalized in the Basketball Hall of Fame. Garnett is being put in the hall alongside other legends like Kobe Bryant and Tim Duncan. While Garnett won a championship with Boston, he started out his career with the Minnesota Timberwolves. He has had a topsy-turvy relationship with the organization, particularly the owner, Glenn Taylor. In a recent interview with The Athletic, Garnett spoke about how Taylor went against the wishes of himself and Flip Saunders. Garnett is extremely upset at Taylor and says he doesn't want his jersey retired in the city because he doesn't want to work with a snake. Now, the story was coming out with Kevin Garnett that he would sign with the Timberwolves and retire with the Timberwolves if, after he retired, his jersey would be retired and that he would be a part of the organization. He would work alongside certain people, the owners, the GMs, and he'd have a position with the Timberwolves organization, which that did not come true because of the owner, Glenn Taylor. Mm-hmm. Now, Glenn Taylor is a very rich man. He's owned the team for over 50 years, almost 50 years now. And this is a man that over the years, people have complained about around the league. Not about him spending money or him being a good owner. Just the things that have come out of his camp. Things that he said about players. And I'm not gonna bring up stories that I don't know, but this is a multi-billionaire that there were stories coming out of Timberwolves land that this man has not only spoken bad about some of the players that he has worked with, but he has spoken bad about legends that he has been part of his organization. Guys like Kevin Garnett, Stephon Marbury. He said something about Tom Thibodeau when he let go of Tom Thibodeau a year ago. This is a man that never holds back on what he says. But the one thing he held back on is the one thing that Kevin Garnett will not stand for, and that's being a snake. When you tell somebody, I want you to come back to my organization, I want you to retire as a Minnesota Timberwolf because you were the main structure of what this organization was when it was an expansion franchise.
He's still the best player by far they've ever had.
And I'm not saying, and everybody says, well, how has he been an owner of the Timberwolves for 50 years when they've been an expansion franchise? He wasn't an owner of the Timberwolves. He's been an owner of professional sports teams for almost 50 years, not just the Timberwolves. Now, I look at the Minnesota Timberwolves as an organization and the way it's been run over the years. Now, is this a good, very well-mannered organization? It isn't. No. They brought in Tom Thibodeau, who I believe was a perfect fit for that organization as a coach, not as a coach and GM. But the only way they can pry Tom Thibodeau away from possibly getting a job with the Knicks or wherever he was going to go, because he wanted to be the Knicks head coach, they had to pay him a lot of money, and they had to offer him the GM position, which in turn screwed up the organization and eventually came upon guys like Jimmy Butler, who eventually wanted out, was traded away for practically nothing. Now, this organization, which was a very, a year and a half ago, was supposed to be an up-and-coming organization with guys like Karl Anthony Towns, Anthony Wiggins, Jimmy Butler, Tom Thibodeau, and even, what's his name again, the guy that they drafted, the point guard from the Providence team.
Oh, Chris Dunn.
Yeah, Chris Dunn, who completely failed as an NBA player.
I was wrong on him. I liked him a lot out of that draft.
When you think about what the Timberwolves have done over the years, how about the year that they drafted 2 point guards in the first round? This is a team that has not drafted right. This is a team that hasn't run an organization right. And it has a lot to do with one person and one person only. Ownership. If everybody wants to blame James Dolan for everything, because that's what it seems like. Everybody wants to blame James Dolan for the screw-up New York Knicks.
So this guy's the lesser talked about James Dolan.
Pretty much.
All right.
So nobody talks about him because he's based out of Minnesota. The organization hasn't won anything, hasn't gone anywhere, hasn't won championships. The best years of this organization's existence was with Kevin Garnett and Stephon Marbury.
And even so, that was a short stint, too.
This organization has not had many superstars. It hasn't. And a guy like Kevin Garnett, at his profiled personality, when you think of Kevin Garnett, you think of his personality. You remember what he said to Carmelo Anthony on the basketball court.
And in the locker room.
What did he say? He said his wife tasted like Honey Nut Cheerios or something like that. Yeah. I mean, his personality has changed the sport of basketball. It really has. Guys like him, Ben Wallace, Rasheed Wallace, guys of those magnitude have changed the game. And now you see players like LeBron James and Harden and Russell Westbrook. These are all characters, but not characters like we saw in the early 2000s. Kevin Garnett changed the game. Just like Kobe did, just like Tim Duncan did. There were three different style of players. Kevin Garnett was a guy that was a great rebounder and had built his perimeter game as the years went by. He was an inside dominance player who was the anchor of the Timberwolves defense. When he went to the Celtics, he became more of an offensive player because then you could spread the offense because you had Ray Allen and had Paul Pierce. His game transitioned the game of leadership, the way he played the game, the eliteness of what he did on the court, changed the game. So did Kobe Bryant with his amazing offensive style of game. His all-around game as a defensive player. His style of game brought the style of Michael Jordan back to the league when Michael Jordan retired. And then there was Tim Duncan, the amazing leader. The guy that led a team to not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 world championships.
Maybe the most humble superstar legend you'll ever see.
Was the king of banking the ball. He changed the game. But what changes all three of these players from one another is personality. And as much as Kobe Bryant people would say Kobe Bryant had an amazing personality, Kevin Garnett was on a whole nother level.
He was fiery and intimidating.
Kevin Garnett was a different person. We know what Tim Duncan was. We know what Kobe Bryant was. His personality was alive and loving and people, and he was the Mamba. Never liked to lose.
He was intimidating in his own right, but Kevin Garnett was another level.
Kevin Garnett took it to another level. And when you hear this story coming out that he doesn't want to wear the jerseys to wear the Timberwolves jersey to the Hall of Fame. He doesn't want his jersey raised in Minnesota because of the ownership and the organization. That says a lot about an organization that had arguably one of the best power forwards of all time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if he's going to be able to have control over winning argument maybe to not put it up, but he's not going to attend any events or alumni stuff that they're going to do from now on.
No, he said he does not want his jersey being lifted.
Mm-hmm. Again, I don't know if he'll be able to do that, though, because, again, he is the best player by far in their franchise history.
If he doesn't go there, what is the point of lifting a jersey? If he doesn't go to the event, why even waste your time?
They might even do it anyway, just because they don't have anything else in that franchise.
I don't know if he's going to be going to anything with that franchise.
No, I'm not saying
soon,
he would.
unless the owner comes up and actually apologizes what he did to Kevin.
Agreed. I'm just saying there's going to be they're so desperate to just have that legend just because they're such a young franchise that's been dysfunctional for the most part that they might even do without him.
Charlie, actually, I'm reading what everybody is writing. And by the way, you can write us on Facebook right now because we have a computer that we can actually read what everybody is writing us. So right now, there I am. Charlie Rose, top 5 hardest NCAA college football stadiums to play in.
Wow, that is an interesting question. I mean, most of them, again, correlate with the great teams, I think, for the most part, Charlie. SEC stadiums probably being the most. I think Texas A&M, when they were in the Big 12, was one of the biggest ones, but they haven't been since the SEC. And then if you want like a sleeper one, Boise State's really been tough for a while, too, even though they obviously don't play the same level of competition.
LSU is a hard place to play
LSU is, too, yep.
LSU is a very hard place to play in. I would say the hardest place to play in, and I've heard this from many NFL players over the years, LSU is one of the hardest places to play in because of the crowd, the fans, and really the way the stadium is set up. The roar of the crowd, how the crowd is on top of you. It's a completely different place than a lot of other places. So USC too.
USC, I think they've lost a little bit of it, but they used to be.
Well, that's because of how bad they've been over the years.
Oh, and the Pac-12 as a whole really hasn't had the same firepower with USC and then with Oregon for a while. They really haven't had that same firepower. They're a balanced conference, but they're not really that same powerhouse that they were in the 2000s. So those stadiums, they're probably still up there, but I don't know about top 5 anymore. You're really looking at a lot of SEC stadiums and Ohio State as well. They're always tough to play. And some of the Big Ten ones you can list them there for in crowd environment, but teams like Michigan and Penn State have lost big games there too, though.
And going back, and you heard it from Speedy, you heard it from me. Those are the top colleges, what I've heard over the years, hardest places to play in for NFL players. But I didn't even know that about Boise State, by the way. But
they're a very tough one. Again, different scheduling, but they're a very tough environment. I think they've only lost like 2 home games in the last 10 years or something like that.
But what I really, looking at this story with Kevin Garnett, you could only sit there and laugh as a fan because you think the Knicks are the biggest laughing stock in the NBA. But there are other organizations like the Timberwolves that there is not one Knick player. There is not one Knick player that has been invited to being raising their jersey and being retired as an all-time Knick that has ever said no to James Dolan. There's not one. Not even Charles Oakley, who is never going to be raised in the rafters, because I don't think Charles Oakley, as much as he was my favorite player growing up as a New York Knicks fan because of his rough and ruggedness, I don't think he was good enough to be in the rafters. He wasn't an all-time great Knick. He wasn't. Anybody that knows the Knicks knows that. But he was a rugged player, and he brought you a personality that New Yorkers could respect.
Plus, it's also a Madison Square Garden. You want to have the greatest of the great up there, not necessarily just. I mean, Oakley was a great player in his own right, but he more like you said, a fan favorite. So maybe that has more magnitude to it too. That's why I'm saying with the Timberwolves, they don't really have that kind of mantra. They might be desperate just to get anything up.
Well, as much as you have a mantra. You have Stephon Marbury, who's really the king of China. This guy is the biggest superstar over there in Asia. And you had him for almost 7 years of his career. His greatest part of his career was with the Timberwolves. Why hasn't the ownership reached out to Stephon Marbury and said, listen, we want to retire your jersey in Minnesota? It never happened. It never happened. And now all of a sudden, Kevin Garnett has come out and said that they can say or do whatever they want. I am not going to Minnesota. I do not want my jersey raised up in the rafters. And if they raise it, I will not be there. So saying that and calling the ownership and the organization a snake organization only tells you one thing. If he's not going to do it, what makes you so sure that Stephon Marbury wants to do it? And that's where, who are you going to put? Ricky Rubio up there?